Hello everyone. This is the 18th part of the story, Percy Jackson, the God of Magic. Chapter 86. After my suicidal quest, I was forced to stay in my room, under Odin's and Hestia's orders, so with nothing to do but count the seconds as I stared at the white ceiling of my room while I wondered, when would I be strong enough so that I didn't have the need to go through these troubling situations? I was tired of being so weak, and while I knew that my strength had drastically increased during the last few months, I would always be confronted with the cruel and harsh reality that I still wasn't strong enough to defend myself against most of the monsters out there. The reality was that there was always going to be bigger fish swimming in the lake of my life, waiting for the right moment to show me how much I had to improve if I wanted to survive, like Jormungandr did. Oh, that reminds me. Jormungandr and I actually fought on Midgard, but not the Midgard one would expect. Apparently the tales about his location had been a bit off, to say something, or rather I should say, they were lacking part of the information needed to answer such a question. Odin clarified that, apparently, there are two Midgards, or rather one divided into two. It's confusing, but when has something that had to do with the gods been easy? Anyways, back to the point, two Midgards, the one I knew, and the one Jormungandr lives in, which is known as Misgard Skadi, the shadow of Midgard, of something ominous as fuck, as everything in my life as of lately. I'm not going to lie, I miss when my life had less problems, when my only worry was what kind of diabolical prank I was going to inflict upon my friends. I miss those days without any existential problems, without mortal enemies, without fear of losing everything once again. But I guess it wasn't all bad. Hestia was an oasis in the desert of my life, the only positive constant in my life. Although I guess I'm being a little unfair, Hades and Persephone were also essential parts of my life. Odin and Thor too, although it was more than clear that Odin wanted something from me. Even a blind man would catch on that. What exactly did he want? I don't know. The man was difficult to read, too difficult. Adam, Hestia greeted as she entered the room, a plate of food in her hand. I made paella, she added with a little smile. And just like that, my depression was gone. What does it matter if I'm not strong enough yet? Someday I will be. In the meantime, I can't complain, not really, not as long as I can enjoy this smile, for me. I asked her, gesturing to the plate in her hand with wishful desire. What can I say? I love paella. In fact, from now on it will be my sacred dish. I don't know if the gods have that, but fuck them if they don't. I'll make this a tradition. Maybe, Hestia giggled, a playful grin slowly forming on her face as she teased me with the plate filled with delicious godly nourishment. She was playing a dangerous game. You wouldn't dare to do this, would you? Looking at her intently, I allowed a fake tear to slip down my cheek for dramatic purposes. If she wanted to play, two could play this game. Well played, Hestia sighed, setting the plate down, full of delicious European nectar on my bed. The tear was a low blow though. She pouted. Don't hate the player, hate the game, I replied as I wolfed down my food. When are they going to let me out? I asked, as I took a water break. Although I understood why I had been kept in quarantine for 2 days, I had recovered. There was no reason to keep me locked up anymore. After you eat everything, Hestia sighed, just promise me you won't risk your life like that again. I promise, I said with resolve, because I would make sure I wouldn't be the small fish next time. After eating my holy dish and being discharged from the jail that was my room, I teleported to Svartalfheim, where without further ado, I delivered the last 2 ingredients to the blacksmith, who eyed me in disbelief for a long moment before he chuckled. I have to admit, lad, I did not expect you to survive this long. The dwarf laughed, grabbing the thong and the scale. Your weapon will be ready in a week. A week? Fair enough. All right, peace out, I chuckled, teleporting back to Asgard. I would take this week to enjoy myself. Maybe watch some movies with Hestia, or maybe play some games with Hades and Persephone. Either way, I was taking this week off. Why? Well, after being smacked like a fly by what I assume has to be Orochimaru's wet dream, I have come to the conclusion I need some time off. Why? Because I want to, that's why. Needless to say, Hestia was thrilled with the idea of having another week of just US time. Heck, someway, she already had a schedule of things to do for this week that fit my decision to take a week off too well. Odin saw this outcome, didn't he? God, I hate that the man shares my future with everyone but me. Odin told me to give you this. Hestia smiled, giving a note. Inside the note there was a little text that said, I don't tell you the future because if I did, it would not be the future anymore, and before you think about it. No, I did not read your mind to answer this, nor I saw a future where you asked me why. I simply know you too well by this point, and therefore it was quite easy to predict what you would think on this very specific moment. By the way, I already claimed the paella for my haul. You want it? You will have to face me. With love, Odin. I hate him, I sighed. At this Hestia gave me another note that said, no you don't. Chapter 87. Motsogner Point of View. Forging the weapon of a god was always a delicate process. I knew that much. One wrong step and the entire thing would go to waste. Kaboom, meaning everything had to go down perfectly. Taking a deep breath, I took an apron and a pair of gloves from my table. With care I took the thong of the mighty Fenrir and placed it by the furnace in the forge, letting it heat up until it could be worked with. Meanwhile, I took to a nearby workbench with various mana working tools, and began carving chunks off of the essences the kid has brought, thinning and refining them until they took the shape I wanted. Thin for infusing purposes, this ought to do, I muttered with smile. I loved a challenge. I was a dwarf, I lived for this. Turning my attention to the forge once again, I saw the thong was already sufficiently hot, meaning I could finally get my hammer on that. With a smile I fixed a magical metal wedge on the anvil I was going to use, before taking the tongs of my table and using them to take the red-hot thong off the forge. Once that was done I placed the thong on the wedge, and using my trusty hammer, I started to mold the thong with it. What a day! My goal was simple: to break the thong into little pieces, and then break those little pieces into dust, which was harder than it sounded, considering Fenrir was immune to physical damage, while his brother was immune to magical damage, meaning working on their parts was probably the most difficult thing I would ever have to do. Little by little, the thong gave in to my hammer strikes like all materials eventually do. Mostly it was thanks to the magical enchant the hammer had for this job, because no amount of physical force was strong enough to break the thong. Once the thong was broken, I took the pieces into the furnace once again to heat them up some more. The next step was turning them into dust, so I had to heat them up a lot. Who would have guessed that I would get the chance to work with these fine materials? I am happy dwarf, ain't gonna lie. Using another hammer, I began pounding on the scale of Jormungandr, one that I had previously put under an acidic solution made specifically to make the tough scale more workable. This was probably the hardest part of my job, because I would have to infuse the scale with the true essences, and considering the scale was immune to magic, it was hard, but I had to do it, so that I could melt it all down together. Normally this would have been impossible, but I ain't no quitter. A dwarf never drops. Down the towel. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the essences I had previously molded, and with my mana working tools, I started to force the infusion, which under normal circumstances would take centuries, but the kid has procured the best virgin tears ever, which were known for having miraculous capabilities in the forge, which made my job a lot easier. Dropping half of the tears on the scale to make the scale easier to mold and keeping the other half for the last pass, I took the opportunity where the scale started to drop its natural defenses. Toto infused the essences inside of the core of the scale. The tears would make the scale vulnerable to magic momentarily, so with that done, I put the scale inside the forge. After all, I had to melt it down before the magic resistance came back on. The tears would only keep that down a few minutes at much. The scale rapidly started to melt down as expected, forming a mix of a new element, One that was the result of the mix between the scale, the tears and the mana essence, making a blue and white substance of pure mana and anti-mana. What a bizarre weapon this kid was going to have. With a smile, I waited for the scale and the other items to fully merge before I pulled the result out and started to mold it once again. When I was finally satisfied with the shape it had taken, I put the substance out of the forge and turned back to the Fong, where I continued between the Fong to dust. This was the final ingredient. It took me a while, 140 hours of non-stop hammering, but I managed to create the amount of wolf dust I was looking for, godly wolf dust at that. Content with my craftsmanship, I heated the wolf dust with the substance I had previously mixed before. Once more until it was red hot. Adding the last few tears, I still had to make sure the substance would allow me to work on it, before quenching it in a nearby vat of oil. Now to shape it, I hummed. With a smile took the substance out, examining it. The result was perfect, there were no impurities on it, and its malleability was stellar. Now to the last step, the golden blood of the child. Now let's see what shape takes your weapon, lad, I chuckled. Dripping the gold ichor I had collected from Adam on the substance, now the weapon would come to life, to match its owner. With a loud explosion, the gold ichor mixed with the flawless substance, creating a new type of weapon, one that was probably my magnum opus. It's beautiful, I muttered, as a well-deserved feeling of pride invaded my chest. The weapon took the shape of a small universe, with stars and constellations, all the inside a singular shape. A small ball, a weapon that would change between being immune to magic and immune physical damage, depending of the user's wish. The lad is going to love this. I smiled, how could he not? I had once again exceeded myself. Chapter 88. Artemis' point of view. Adam was innocent, and I had failed him, which is why I was on the hunt, hunting him. I had to bring him back. If not for him, for Mother, if not because he wanted to avoid Zeus's wrath. This time I would save him. My hunt had proved difficult, no traces of him could be found, and when I did find some, they usually led me to a dead end. But I was the goddess of the hunt, and I wasn't going to give up on this hunt. Olympus needed him, Olympus needed Hestia, and if either of them came back, the other would soon follow. Time was of the essence if we wanted to stop Kronos. And maybe I needed him. My hunt led me to various places, one of them being the school where Percy Jackson and his Cyclop brother used to go. His scent was strong there, as if he had spent quite some time in there, while in other places his scent was weak but fresh, like China and Japan. But this didn't help me at all. I didn't want to know where he had been, if it didn't lead me to where he was. Where was he? And how was he hiding from us? Another realm? Perhaps the underworld? No, his scent didn't smell of death and misery. No, there was something foreign, yet familiar to his aroma. But what? And more importantly, where have I first encountered the particular smell he was carrying on him? Perhaps he had sought shelter in another pantheon. That would make a lot of sense. It would keep them out of the sight of Olympus. Now the question was, what pantheon? The Chinese pantheon? The Japanese pantheon? His scent was fresh around those parts, but I doubt he sought shelter there. Perhaps the answer was tied to the particularly odd smell his scent had. I continued with my hunt, going from one corner of the world to another, until I finally remembered where I had first smelled the scent Adam was carrying. I knew where he was now, the Norse pantheon. Time to talk, little brother, I muttered, teleporting to Boston, where the gate to the realm of Valhalla was located. For a moment I hesitated. Was I doing Hestia and Adam any good? They did nothing wrong, and yet they had been prosecuted, insulted and more. Was bringing them back the right call? It is, of course it was. Adam needed to be with his family, now that he could. What if he had to bow his head and accept a half-baked apology? He was immortal now, he would have time to cope, right? Hello, young lady, an all too familiar voice chuckled. How could I forget? The man speaking was no other than Odin. the king of the Norse pantheon, any reason why you are staring at the gate to my realm with such passion? Odin asked, a smile forming on his face. I know you have Adam and Hestia, I replied, I have come to retrieve them. Oh, I see, well that might be a problem, Odin clicked his tongue. I narrowed my eyes at the old god, and why is that? I don't feel like giving them to you. All of a sudden, I felt as if the temperature around us had dropped to Arctic levels. They don't belong here, I felt like a prey, and I didn't like it, at all, this pressure was suffocating. Odin hummed, and with a chuckle he added, I don't know if you got the memo, but I am the king of Asgard, and well, I get to decide who belongs or not to my realm, and they have my blessing. Zeus will wage war for this, I shot back, perhaps if he knew there was a possibility of war, he would allow me to take them back. I didn't want to hurt them, not anymore, but we needed them. But instead of getting a serious response, Odin laughed, that's adorable, war, with your granddaddy out there trying to kill you guys? He snorted, I doubt Zeus would risk so much, that would be a stupid move then again. He hummed. You would still risk war for two gods of another pantheon? I asked in disbelief. Yes, Odin nodded, we are different to you Greeks, we have been bred for war, we were born for conflict, and yes, things have changed, as they normally do, but believe me, all my people are waiting, is for an excuse to finally fight something, a reason to bash some skulls and then dine in my halls. I looked at him, a bit taken back by his declaration. I know I hurt him, but we need them. If another Titanomachy stars, we will need the hearth with us, and whatever Adam can offer us. I also had to apologize for not trying to investigate if he was guilty or not. Oh well, Odin shrugged, I suppose this is what humans call, 'cause in effect, he smiled, and of course I knew it was our fault, and I wanted to tell him that, but before I managed to do so, a hammer slammed in the face with an earth-shattering force. That was but a taste, someone growled, and Odin chuckled. Did you have to strike her? Thor. Odin inquired. I stood up, nose bleeding golden ichor, what is the meaning of this? I hissed. That was payback bitch, Thor shot back, hurting my brother is a sin he might learn to forget, but I do not share his golden heart. Adam was friends with Thor to the point the Nordic god felt the need to attack me, to the point they were brothers in arms, blood brothers perhaps? I will not tolerate this, deep down, I knew I deserved this, I had hurt Adam and Hestia, the two beings besides Mother, that had yet to hurt me in any way, even Apollo had hurt me, with what he did to Orion. Let it be clear Greek goddess, your hunt ends here, for if you try to take Adam and Hestia out of here against their will, you will face the might of Mjolnir. Thor threatened. Odin and Thor, the two greatest gods in the Norse pantheon, both equally terrifying, and somehow both equally interested in Adam, is he happy? I asked after a moment. That is none of your concern, Thor hissed. Now, what will it be, young goddess? Odin inquired, leaning back a bit, will you try to start a calamity by breaking a war between pantheons, or will you go back and say, you failed in your hunt? For once, I would do what was right for Adam. I will try my best to keep his location out of sight. I had feeling you were going to say that, Odin smiled, tossing me a crystal, eat it, and everything you think you know about where is Adam and how to find him will change, only that I assure you. A magic crystal to change my memory. I muttered in realization, how come we didn't think of this possibility before? This had to be how Luke tricked Apollo and his powers, by making himself believe Adam was a traitor, he edited his memories. Just like Odin was offering to do, very well, until next time, I took the crystal and ate it, perhaps. This was for the best. If Adam trusted them, I would do the same, taking a blind step out of my comfort zone, if only to do my wrongs right. Chapter 89. After a week of watching movies and doing other stuff Hestia wanted to, It was time to go and get my new weapon. I was very excited and intrigued about this. I risked my life for it. It had to be something good. Something special, and the best part was I had no idea what awaited me. It made this all the more exciting. I just couldn't wait to see what destiny had stored for me, so with a big smile full of expectation, I teleported to Svartalfheim, where the dwarfs greeted me happily. "Here for your weapon, right?" one of the dwarves asked, and I nodded. "Well, follow me, lad, Motsogner is waiting for you." With a smile, I did as I was told and followed the dwarves even though I already knew where to go. It wasn't my first time here, but it wouldn't hurt me to be polite. Besides, this wasn't delaying my current situation that much, so why not? It took the dwarves around 5 minutes to lead me to Motsogner's smith, where the dwarf jumped out of his smith and with a smile said, "Lad, ready to see the best weapon I have forged so far?" "Well, ain't that fuel for the hype?" I chuckled, eyeing the dwarf with what could only be described as childlike expectation. I replied. The hype was just over the top. I almost died, had to fight 2 monsters above my league to get ingredients. Well, one of them, but still, the hype was just too much to bear right now. "Well, follow me, lad," Motsogner chuckled, gesturing with a hand to follow him to the back of the forge. "Your weapon is one of a kind. The first one of his kind I have forged at least," he elaborated with a tone of excitement. "Its form is ever-changing. And its capabilities? Well, to be honest, I don't know in full, and that excites me. I forged something I don't know with certainty what it actually does. Isn't that exciting?" I tilted my head to the side. A weapon he had no idea what it did? At least fully? I didn't know if I should be excited or worried. Then again, this meant my weapon like me was a box of surprises, a wild card. And to be honest, the more I thought about that, the more exciting the idea got. "It is," I nodded, deciding I would be happy with whatever I got. I risked my life for it anyway. "Here it is," Motsogner said, pointing to a blue ball. What in the 9 realms was that?" "I see your shock," the dwarf smirked, and yes, of course I was shocked. I expected a sword. Well, not a sword, I am a mage. No, to be precise, battle mage, so I expected something like a staff or something, not a blue very cool looking ball. Don't let its shape fool you, this baby is lethal and unique. As I studied the weapon up close, I felt as if the weapon was resonating with my soul. It was a weird feeling, but it felt like a part of my body was floating in front of me, both separated from me and together. It was an odd sensation, one that I didn't expect. "It feel like an extra limb," I muttered. At this, Motsogner pulled out a notebook and started to take notes. Rolling my eyes at the dwarf, I focused on the weapon, trying to move it. If it was like an arm or a leg, a simple thought would be enough to make it move, and to my surprise it was. It was like having a tail. As a cat, one knows how to instinctively move one's tail. This was like that. This weapon was my tail in a way. I just knew how to move it. "Fascinating," Motsogner muttered with a smile, his hands close together as he stared at me. "The weapon and the ichor inside of it bonded with your body once again. This is simply fascinating." Not really understanding what the dwarf was talking about, I decided it was time to go back to Asgard. After all, I had already gotten what I had come to get. There was nothing more for me here, except maybe being studied by a curious group of dwarves. "I will take my leave. Thanks for this," I said, before I teleported back to Asgard with my new weapon, eager to try what could it do, and how much power would it give me. Leto point of view. My son, my poor baby, had been innocent all along. I could only imagine, and it probably felt short, how betrayed he felt. How hurt he felt to be betrayed by the few people you thought were close to you. Luke had been the one responsible for this. That little traitor had been the one to hurt my child, and I wanted nothing more than to kill him. So Artemis, Apollo, and myself were hunting him. We had to find him, torture him and kill him. It was the first step to get Adam to forgive us. And even if he didn't forgive us, it would bring me an unmeasurable amount of pleasure seeing that rat suffer. Though this mission had proved to be a tad more difficult than it should have been, Luke was nowhere to be seen, no tracks, no nothing. Kronos was keeping him out of sight. Hiding for the eyes of those who wanted to end him, Kronos might be weak right now, but he was crafty, he always has been, meaning he won't let anyone find Luke until it's already too late, but I can wait. A hunter knows how to be patient, and I was a hunter, maybe not as good as my children, but I was a good hunter, and Luke, he was my prey. I will kill you, child, I muttered, holding a pic of Luke, no matter what he would die, for what he did. Chapter 90. After getting back to Asgard, and showing my weapon to everyone, what can I say? I wanted to flex my weird-looking weapon, anywho, after showing my weapon to everyone, Odin himself told me I had a message from Sun Wukong himself, saying that he was waiting for me in Brazil to start my training. Thor immediately jumped at the opportunity and said he was going to go with me. Needless to say, I replied telling the Monkey King I would be there in a few minutes. After all, training with Sun Wukong and Thor would help me figure out what my weapon was capable of. After giving my goodbyes to Hestia and Odin, I teleported Thor and I to Brazil, where all we had to do now was wait. You are a bit too excited with this, I chuckled. Thor seemed like a kid about to get some candy, he was elated with this. Why? Well, there were various possibilities, but none made much sense. Do you maybe want to fight Sun Wukong? Thor looked at me, and laughed, of course. I have heard tales of his might. I want to face him in honorable combat. Just as I expected. You will have time for that later, Sun Wukong chuckled, startling the heck out of me. How in the heck I failed to notice him, his presence like Thor lacks all forms of subtlety, boo. Trying to scare me? I asked with a smile, but something about this was off, even now I couldn't feel his presence at all, it was as if I was talking to a rock. What are you? I'm a clone, Sun Wukong the clone admitted, I was sent here by the original. Right now the original is talking with Buddha about keeping this place clouded from the eyes of the Greeks and the Romans, the clone added with a serious tone. Cloud the area, that was a smart move, okay. I think you don't understand, kid, the clone chuckled. You ain't leaving this place until the boss says you are strong enough to get past him. Thor broke at this into a fit of laughter. I like it. We shall beat him into form. The god of thunder declared, and I wasn't sure I liked what they were implying. Training was one thing, but not being to leave, I didn't like it at all. Before I had the time to reply, I felt the suffocating aura of Sun Wukong appear behind me. Yo kid. Boss, the clone bowed, exploding into smoke, leaving nothing behind. Sorry I took so much time, Sun Wukong sighed. Buddha accepted to help me keep the Greeks and Romans out, but told me I should be respectful with the pantheon responsible for this area by asking their permission. So I had to talk with the Brazilian pantheon, and boy let me tell you, Jackie the Brazilian goddess of the moon is hard to work with. Long story short, I promised to help them if something arises, and they allowed us to train here. But, why? I mean, why train here? We had both Asgard and whenever the Chinese gods reside, why? Why is Brazil so important? Why here though? I asked the god. That is a good question, Thor nodded. I do love me some good Brazilian women, but still I don't see the point of training here. Well, Sun Wukong chuckled, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. I wanted to go out, he muttered, his two index fingers touching together in shame. I see, I sighed, wondering if all my friends were going to be like that. So, about the training, your Naruto rip-off technique said something about not leaving until you deemed me worthy. I knew Sun Wukong was older than Naruto the series, but I wanted to tease the monkey. First of all, I have thousands of years older than that Japanese show. As for what my clone said, Sun Wukong smirked. If you ever want to see your lady again, you will have to pass me test. This is the most entertaining. I approve. Thor declared with a big smile on his face as he slammed his Mjolnir into a nearby tree, breaking it in half to accentuate his violent approval. A man can go to great lengths to get back to his woman. This is the most genius training regime ever. She. I groaned. Well, if that's the case, let me tell Hestia I won't be back in a bit. At that I teleported back to Asgard, or I should rather said. I tried to, because as soon as I casted the spell I felt, as if a massive hand had slammed back to where I was. The fuck was that? Oh that? Sun Wukong chuckled, that was Buddha, you know? One with everything and stuff, thanks to that he can't stop you from ever leaving this country, at least until you are strong enough to leave, he grinned ever so lightly. Fuck. I was fucked. I see. Don't get all down my brother. Thor hugged me, you shall beat the furry god in no time. Furry god. Sun Wukong snorted, that's a new one. Alright, let's start training then. I sighed, regardless of the method he was using, this was an opportunity one just couldn't allow myself to miss. So what are we doing exactly? We are going to fight until you are strong enough to get out of here, simple, Sun Wukong replied, you see. The first thing I learned about you was that you were even worse than I was controlling my power back then. At best you use a 5 maybe a 10% of your power, while the rest is wasted, he elaborated, pointing his staff to me. And after some thinking I realized, it was because you were still processing the fact you were a god, which in all honesty made my work all too easy. All I have to do is beat you until the concept of you being a god settles inside of your mind. Aren't you forgetting something? Thor growled, lightning breaking from his body to the ground. Was he going to try and protect me? It's not I, it's we. We are going to beat him up. I want in the fun too. Or maybe not. This will hurt a lot, I muttered. At this the gods grinned. Meh. It couldn't possibly be worse than Tartarus. This marks the end of part 18 of the story, Percy Jackson, the God of Magic. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.